The Interstellar Coalition Academy stood as a monument to the galaxy's finest military tradition, a sprawling complex of gleaming structures that reached toward the stars it sought to conquer and protect. The Academy's reputation for producing the most elite peacekeeping officers, often through decidedly unpeaceful methods, was unrivaled throughout the known universe. Its advanced technology allowed for complete environmental customization in each training facility and living quarter, from atmospheric composition to gravity settings adjusted for the diverse physiology of students from 1,000 worlds. Commander Theron leaned against the observation deck railing, his scaled body towering over most other faculty members. His thick hide, reminiscent of ancient Earth crocodiles but with the added benefit of natural armor plating across vital areas, shifted as he exhaled a heavy sigh. Beside him, Deputy Commander Lyra perched delicately on a specially designed seat. Her insectoid frame, complete with 4 upper limbs and an exoskeleton that gleamed with iridescent blues and greens, gave her a perpetual appearance of alertness, a stark contrast to Theron's feigned disinterest. Another recruitment cycle, another batch of disappointments, Theron grumbled, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate the air around them. Lyra's compound eyes shifted, taking in multiple view screens simultaneously as they displayed the incoming cadets. Some promising specimens. The Dravik from Sector 7 shows exceptional potential, and there's a Quarian with the highest aptitude scores I've seen in cycles. Theron's attention suddenly focused on one particular screen. "What is that?" he asked, mandibles clicking in what might have been amusement or disgust. The screen showed a bipedal creature with no natural armor, no extra limbs, no apparent defensive structures whatsoever. Just smooth, vulnerable skin covering a fragile-looking frame. The creature, clearly a human, walked with confident strides despite being surrounded by beings twice its size and with obvious natural advantages. "An Earthling," Lyra said, her tone carrying a hint of dismissive surprise. "A Type B planet representative. Gravity classification, 1G standard." Theron made a sound between a laugh and a snort. "Another Earth toy? Command must be scraping the bottom of the recruitment pool." Lyra tilted her head, four-fingered hand tapping at the control panel to bring up the human's file. "Cale Adamson, from their Special Forces Division. Whatever that means for a species with no natural defenses. What's their homeworld gravity again?" 1G standard, Theron asked, the corners of his reptilian mouth lifting in what passed for a smile among his kind. "How adorable." The two commanders watched as Cale made his way through the processing center. Unlike many new recruits who gaped at the Academy's architecture or flinched at the sight of unfamiliar species, the human maintained a composed demeanor, his blue eyes taking in every detail with methodical precision. "You know," Theron said slowly, his pupils narrowing to vertical slits, "I think our Earth friend needs a proper welcome." Lyra turned all 4 of her hands in a gesture of inquiry. "What did you have in mind, Commander?" Theron's smile widened, revealing rows of pointed teeth. "It's tradition to test the limitations of every species that comes through those doors. Let's see how our soft-skinned friend handles a little pressure." Later that night, after orientation had concluded and the new cadets were assigned their quarters, Theron and Lyra gathered in the environmental control room. With a few quick adjustments and an override of standard protocols, they set the gravity in Cale's quarters to 2G, twice Earth standard gravity. "Camera feed online," Lyra announced, her mandibles clicking with anticipation. "Now we wait for our fragile friend to collapse under his own weight." The screen showed Cale entering his assigned quarters, a Spartan room with basic furnishings designed to accommodate multiple species types. The moment he crossed the threshold, the increased gravity took effect. They watched expectantly for the human to stumble, fall, or at least show signs of distress. Instead, Cale merely paused, his shoulders tensing slightly. His posture adjusted almost imperceptibly, and after a brief moment, he continued into the room with only a minor change to his gait. He placed his minimal belongings on the storage shelf, then stood in the center of the room. "Room status?" Cale asked aloud. The room's AI responded promptly. All systems operational. Current environmental settings. Temperature 294 Kelvin. Humidity 42%. Gravity 2.0 Earth Standard G. Kale nodded, seemingly processing this information. Then, instead of collapsing or calling for assistance, a small smile played across his lips. Increase gravity to 3.0 G, he said calmly. Authorization code Kilo Alpha 7. Theranand. Lyra stared at the screen in stunned silence. Command confirmed. The AI responded, adjusting gravity to 3.0 G. The human rolled his shoulders as the room's gravity increased further. Then, to the absolute astonishment of the watching commanders, he dropped to the floor and began performing push-ups with controlled, measured movements. You just asked for more, Theron whispered, his usual composure completely shattered. News of the 3G human spread through the academy faster than a quantum transmission. By morning, cadets and instructors alike were buzzing with speculation. Many refused to believe it until they saw the security footage themselves. Others developed a newfound wariness when passing the human in the corridors. Kale, for his part, seemed either oblivious to or unconcerned with his sudden notoriety. He arrived at the first physical training session exactly 3 minutes early, dressed in the standard academy uniform that somehow looked inadequate on his unarmored frame. Training Chief Grok was a massive being composed primarily of crystalline structures and dense mineral deposits, effectively a sentient boulder with limbs. His gravelly voice echoed through the training facility as he outlined the day's objectives. First assessment, obstacle course, designed to test multiple physiological advantages in standardized 1.5G environment. Course completion time and technique will be evaluated. The obstacle course before them was a marvel of engineering, with sections that favored different physical attributes: strength, speed, flight, aquatic movement, and more. It was specifically designed to be challenging for all species, with no single biological advantage offering a complete edge. The other cadets performed as expected. A winged Thresian glided over certain obstacles, but struggled with the underwater segments. A six-limbed Trainee demonstrated remarkable climbing abilities, but lacked the raw power for the strength-based challenges. Each species showcased their evolutionary advantages and compensated for their limitations. When Kale's turn came, a hush fell over the assembled cadets. How would the seemingly disadvantaged human perform? The answer was nothing short of remarkable. Kale approached the course not with raw power or specialized adaptations, but with a fluid combination of techniques that spoke of intense training and deep understanding of biomechanics. He used momentum to overcome strength challenges, precision timing to navigate shifting platforms, and an underwater breathing technique that allowed him to stay submerged far longer than anyone expected. Most impressive was his parkour-like approach to vertical obstacles. Rather than simply climbing, he used wall-running techniques, precisely calculated jumps, and grip strength that belied his frame to ascend surfaces with astonishing speed. Kale completed the course with the third-best time in the group, behind only the naturally swift Trainee and the partially airborne Thresian, a result that left Grok staring at his chrono in disbelief. Acceptable performance, Earth Cadet, Grok rumbled, which from him constituted high praise. The mess hall presented its own challenge. The Academy's food synthesis systems were calibrated for the broadest possible range of dietary needs, resulting in nutrition that was technically adequate but almost universally unappetizing. Kale examined his plate of gray protein composite with barely concealed skepticism before taking a cautious bite. Not quite up to Earth standards, came a sneering voice from behind him. Kale turned to find himself facing 3 Cthar cadets, feline humanoids with impressive musculature and retractable claws that were currently partially extended in a display of casual threat. Their species evolved on a high-gravity planet and were known for their strength and territorial behavior. "It's nutritious," Kale replied diplomatically, neither backing down nor escalating. The lead Cthar, whose name tag identified him as Razok, leaned closer. "We heard about your little gravity trick. Some kind of Earth augmentation, no doubt. Your kind always relies on technology to compensate for your natural inadequacies. Several nearby cadets had gone quiet, watching the interaction with interest. Interspecies confrontations weren't uncommon during the first week, as natural hierarchies established themselves. No augmentation, Kale said, his tone remaining even. Just adaptation. Razok's whiskers twitched in irritation at the human's composure. With deliberate slowness, he reached out and shoved Kale's tray, sending the unappetizing food splattering across the table. Oops, Razok said with mock innocence. Gravity malfunction. What happened next occurred so quickly that many observers later disagreed on the sequence of events. As Razok's hand was still extended from the shove, Kale somehow redirected it, using the Ktharis' own momentum to send him off balance. Simultaneously, Kale's other hand found what appeared to be a pressure point at the base of Razok's neck. The much larger Kthar suddenly found himself immobilized, face pressed against the table, with the human applying what looked like minimal effort. The other two Kthar moved to intervene, but Kale shifted slightly, maintaining his hold on Razok while positioning himself to address the new threats. The calculated look in his eyes made them hesitate. I prefer we skip this particular academy tradition, Kale said quietly, releasing Razok with a subtle movement that somehow helped the Kthar regain his balance rather than causing further embarrassment. We're all here to learn. Razok rubbed his neck, eyes wide with surprise rather than anger. What was that technique? He asked, professional curiosity temporarily overriding his territorial display. Pressure point manipulation. Works on most species with centralized nervous systems, Kale explained. I'd be happy to demonstrate properly during combat training. The confrontation ended as quickly as it had begun, but its impact rippled through the mess hall. The human wasn't just surviving the Academy's challenges. He was revealing skills that none had anticipated. In the combat simulation that afternoon, Kale further demonstrated his capabilities. The exercise was a team-based scenario, and initially, no other cadets volunteered to join Kale's squad. Instructor VYXX, a veteran with cybernetic enhancements who ran the combat simulations, assigned a reluctant group to work with the human. To everyone's surprise, Kale didn't attempt to take charge. Instead, he quickly assessed his teammates' natural abilities and suggested formations that maximized their strengths. His marksmanship with standard-issue weapons proved exceptional, and his tactical suggestions helped the makeshift team achieve objectives with unexpected efficiency. The Earth Cadet understands battlefield geometry, VYXX commented to another instructor. Notice how he's using minimal movement, conserving energy, while maintaining optimal firing positions. By the end of the session, Kale's team had achieved the highest score, and his initially reluctant teammates were engaged in animated tactical discussion with him. Meanwhile, Commander Theron and Deputy Commander Lyra reviewed security footage from Kale's quarters, where he continued to train under triple Earth gravity during his personal time. This doesn't make sense, Lyra said, her compound eyes fixed on the screen. I've studied Earth physiology. They shouldn't be capable of this level of adaptation. Theron nodded slowly. Something's not right. Access his complete file from Earth Command. The file that appeared on their screen was suspiciously basic. It listed Kale's service record as Special Forces Officer, but provided minimal details about his specific training or assignments. Medical records showed standard human baselines with no significant anomalies. This file is too clean, Lyra observed, her antennae twitching with suspicion. Almost as if it's been sanitized. Or fabricated, Theron added. I think it's time we had a direct conversation with our unusual Earth recruit. The following week brought increasingly advanced training scenarios. The Environmental Adaptation Chamber was particularly revealing. Cadets were exposed to various extreme conditions: intense heat, sub-zero cold, high pressure, toxic atmospheres, and evaluated on their survival techniques and adaptation strategies. Most species had evolutionary advantages for certain environments, but struggled in others. The amphibious Nerii excelled in high-pressure aquatic simulations, but faltered in arid conditions. The silicon-based Tholians easily withstood extreme heat, but became brittle and slow in cold environments. Kale, however, displayed remarkable adaptability across all scenarios. In high-temperature simulations, he used controlled breathing techniques to regulate his body temperature. In toxic environments, he minimized oxygen consumption to reduce exposure. In extreme cold, he employed circulation exercises to maintain blood flow to extremities. It's not that he's naturally adapted to everything, observed Medical Officer Selena during one simulation. He's using scientific knowledge and trained responses to overcome biological limitations. I've never seen anything like it. After the environmental trials, Commander Theron summoned Kale to his office. The human stood at attention before the commander's massive desk, his posture perfect despite the Academy's 1.5G standard gravity. At ease, Cadet Adamson, Theron said, studying the human with narrowed eyes. I have questions about your performance. Yes, Commander, Kale replied neutrally. You've demonstrated capabilities that exceed our understanding of human physiology, Theron stated bluntly. Your file tells us nothing useful. I want the truth. Kale was silent for a moment, seemingly weighing his options. Then he gave a small nod, as if coming to a decision. I'm part of Earth's Pioneer Adaptation Program, he finally said. A classified initiative designed to maximize human survival and combat capabilities across all environments. Explain, Theron demanded, his interest clearly piqued. Earth is tired of being underestimated, Commander, Kale continued. We're viewed as a soft species from a low-gravity world with no natural defenses. The reality is that humans have always compensated through adaptation and innovation. The program simply takes that natural human trait to its logical conclusion. And the gravity tolerance? A slight smile crossed Kale's face. Earth's surface gravity varies by location, from 0.997 G to 1.013 G. Nothing significant to most species, but humans have always trained in variable conditions. Ancient Earth military units would train at high altitudes to improve performance at sea level. Modern special forces use resistance training and environmental manipulation to enhance capabilities. He paused. When I realized my quarters had been set to 2G, I recognized it as an opportunity to demonstrate what the program has achieved. Theron leaned back, his scaled hide creaking against his chair. So, requesting 3G was a deliberate demonstration? Of course, Kale admitted. I was sent here with a purpose beyond personal achievement, Commander. Earth wants recognition of its potential. We believe we deserve a more prominent role in the coalition. Theron studied the human carefully. I'm not entirely convinced, Cadet. Your explanation sounds reasonable, but I've been an instructor long enough to know when I'm getting a partial truth. With respect, Commander, that's all I'm authorized to share at this time, Kale responded evenly. After a moment of tension, Theron nodded slowly. Very well. Your performance speaks for itself, regardless of its source. He tapped a command into his console. I'm approving your advancement to senior combat trials. Let's see what you're truly capable of. As Kale left the office, Theron activated his communication implant. Lyra, schedule a match between the Earth Cadet and Xyler. I want to see how he performs against our top combat specialist. Set it for variable gravity conditions. Xyler was a fourth-year cadet from Trainee 4, a high-gravity world that produced naturally powerful beings. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, with a dense muscular structure and reinforced skeletal system, he had been undefeated in the combat arena for 2 years running. His home planet's 2.5G environment gave him overwhelming strength and endurance advantages against most opponents. The match was scheduled for the variable gravity arena, a specialized training facility where gravity could shift randomly between 1G and 4G during combat. It was typically reserved for advanced training of elite units preparing for multi-environment deployments. Word of the match spread quickly, and by the time Kale entered the arena, the observation deck was packed with cadets and instructors alike. Many had placed informal bets, with the odds heavily favoring Xyler. The Draonian stood in the center of the arena, his massive frame radiating confident power. Combat parameters set, announced the arena AI. Non-lethal combat. Victory by submission or incapacitation. Gravity shifts will occur at random intervals between 1G and 4G. Commence on signal. Kale and Xyler circled each other as the match began under standard 1G conditions. The size difference between them was almost comical. Xyler outweighed Kale by at least 200 pounds of dense muscle. For the first minute, they exchanged no blows, each assessing the other's movement and stance. The first gravity shift came without warning, jumping to 3.2G. Xyler, used to high gravity, pressed his advantage immediately, charging forward with surprising speed. Kale, instead of trying to dodge, dropped into a low stance that distributed the increased weight, then redirected Xyler's momentum in a modified judo throw that used the Draonian's own mass against him. The crowd murmured in appreciation. Xyler recovered quickly, seemingly unharmed, but more cautious. "Clever move, Earthman," he acknowledged. "But tricks won't save you." The next exchange came at 2.7G, with Xyler landing a solid blow that sent Kale sliding across the arena floor. The human recovered with a rolling movement, but a trickle of blood appeared at the corner of his mouth. "First blood to Draonie's 4, someone commented from the observation deck. The gravity shifted downward to 1.3G, and Kale immediately exploited the change. He moved with blinding speed, delivering a combination of strikes that targeted nerve clusters and joint structures in Xyler's anatomy. Each hit was precisely placed to maximize impact while minimizing the force required, a perfect adaptation to fighting a naturally stronger opponent. For nearly 15 minutes, the battle continued through multiple gravity shifts. Xyler relied primarily on his natural strength and endurance, absorbing blows that would have incapacitated others while delivering devastating counters when he could connect. Kale fought with technical precision, using environmental awareness and biomechanical efficiency to stay competitive against his physically superior opponent. At 3.8G, near the upper limit of the arena's capability, both combatants were showing signs of fatigue. Xyler's breathing had become labored, his movements slightly less coordinated. Kale moved with deliberate economy, each action calculated to conserve energy. The decisive moment came when the gravity suddenly dropped to 1G after an extended period at high gravity. Kale, who had been fighting defensively, immediately capitalized on the change with explosive force. He launched into a complex sequence of strikes that forced Xyler to defend from multiple angles simultaneously. When the Draonian committed to blocking a high attack, Kale dropped low and executed a sweeping technique that compromised Xyler's balance. In the split second that Xyler was off balance, Kale applied a joint lock combined with pressure point manipulation that used the Draonian's own weight distribution against him. Xyler found himself in an immobilizing hold, unable to leverage his strength without causing himself injury. After 3 seconds of testing the hold and finding no escape, Xyler tapped the arena floor in submission. The arena went silent. Then, gradually applause began to build until it filled the space. Xyler, released from the hold, rose to his feet and extended a massive hand to Kale. "Well fought, Earth Warrior," he said with genuine respect. "I underestimated your species." Commander Theron's voice came over the announcement system. "Cadet Adamson, report to Advanced Training Division tomorrow at 0600. You've been cleared for elite instruction modules." As Kale left the arena, surrounded by suddenly interested fellow cadets, Theron turned to Lyra. "We've misjudged him. Let's see how far he can go." The Advanced Training Division occupied an isolated section of the academy, normally reserved for final-year specialists and selected officers in continuing education. Kale found himself facing challenges that pushed even his enhanced capabilities to their limits. Zero-gravity combat against multiple opponents required him to completely rethink spatial orientation and momentum application. Kale adapted by developing a fighting style that used minimal contact points to change direction and generate force without traditional leverage. Starfighter simulation through dense asteroid fields tested his reaction time and three-dimensional tactical thinking. Rather than relying on brute force navigation or standard evasion patterns, Kale developed a predictive approach that anticipated fragment movement and optimized fuel consumption. The infiltration exercise against a simulated enemy base with cutting-edge defense systems showcased his problem-solving creativity. Instead of confronting the security measures directly, Kale analyzed the base's resource management systems and created a cascading power fluctuation that temporarily compromised key checkpoints. Perhaps most impressive was the extended survival scenario. Placed in a simulated hostile environment with minimal equipment, Kale demonstrated remarkable resource management and adaptation techniques. He created improvised tools, established sustainable shelter systems, and even developed a method to purify water using materials that the scenario designers hadn't anticipated being useful for that purpose. With each challenge, Kale's reputation grew. Other cadets began approaching him for advice on adaptation techniques, tactical approaches, or specific combat methods. Species that had initially dismissed humans as soft and weak now sought his partnership in joint exercises. Razok, the Kthar who had confronted Kale in the mess hall, became one of his most dedicated training partners. "Your pressure point techniques are remarkably effective," he admitted during one session. "They work on predator physiologies that evolved specifically to resist such manipulation." Human combat arts developed over thousands of years of humans fighting other humans, Kale explained as they practiced. When your opponent shares your exact vulnerabilities, you become very creative about exploiting them. Even the instructors began incorporating some of Kale's methods into their teaching. Combat specialist Myrex was particularly interested in Kale's energy conservation techniques. "Most species rely on their natural advantages," she observed. "Your approach assumes no advantages and optimizes accordingly. It's refreshingly practical." The final assessment came in the form of a large-scale crisis simulation, a hostage rescue operation on a compromised space station. Cadets were formed into multi-species teams, with Kale leading a diverse squad that included Razok, a Nerii environmental specialist named Selith, a Tholian engineer called Vex, and Xyler, who had specifically requested assignment to Kale's team. The scenario was exceptionally challenging. The terrorists, played by senior instructors, employed unexpected tactics. Communication jammers separated the teams, and the station's environmental systems were compromised in ways that created advantages and disadvantages for different species simultaneously. When the initial plan collapsed due to the terrorist countermeasures, Kale's team found themselves isolated in a maintenance section with no contact with other units. Their assigned entry point was heavily guarded, and they had lost access to critical equipment during the initial engagement. "This simulation is rigged," Vex complained, his silicon-based body radiating frustration heat. "The parameters have been altered beyond reasonable expectations." "That's the point," Kale replied calmly. "Let's reassess." He quickly analyzed the station schematics they had memorized during briefing, combined with Vex's knowledge of standard engineering principles and Selith's understanding of life support systems. "The station's gravity control is centralized, but environmental regulation is sectional," Kale noted. "If we can access the maintenance ducts here," he indicated a junction on a rough diagram he'd sketched, "we can manipulate the atmospheric content and temperature in sections to create a diversion." "The ducts are too small for Xyler," Razok pointed out. "But perfect for you and Selith," Kale countered. Meanwhile, Vex can use his heat resistance to approach through the exterior thermal exchange system, bypassing their perimeter completely. Over the next hour, Kale coordinated a complex operation that played to each team member's biological strengths while minimizing their vulnerabilities. Selith used aquatic adaptation to navigate flooded sections and sabotage environmental controls. Razok employed feline agility to move through maintenance shafts and establish surveillance. Vex infiltrated through high-temperature conduits that would have incapacitated most species. Xyler and Kale created a precisely timed distraction that divided the terrorists' attention at the critical moment. What impressed the observing instructors most was not just the plan's effectiveness, but how Kale had transformed a disparate group of specialists into a cohesive unit that communicated with near-perfect efficiency. He's not just adapting himself, Theron observed from the control room. He's facilitating adaptation in others. The operation culminated in a synchronized assault that neutralized the terrorists with minimal collateral damage and no hostage casualties. The other cadet teams, after overcoming their own challenges, arrived to find Kale's squad had already completed the primary objectives and established a secure evacuation route. Kale stood in the center of the simulated chaos, directing the final phases of the operation with calm authority. His uniform was torn and dirty, his breathing heavy but controlled, his eyes alert and focused despite the grueling hours of high-stress activity. As the simulation ended and the all-clear signal sounded, Theron turned to Lyra with newfound respect in his eyes. Send a report to High Command. Request a full reassessment of human potential. Immediately. The graduation ceremony was a spectacle of military pageantry. Representatives from all member worlds of the Coalition gathered to witness the commissioning of the Academy's newest officers. For the first time in the institution's history, a human stood at the head of the class, Cale Adamson, valedictorian with highest honors, an unprecedented achievement for a cadet from a Type B planet. Commander Theron addressed the assembled graduates and dignitaries with uncharacteristic humility. The greatest danger in evaluating potential is not in overestimation, but in premature dismissal, he began. This academy has always prided itself on recognizing excellence across all species, yet we must acknowledge our own biases in what constitutes strength, intelligence, and capability. His gaze settled on Cale. Cadet Adamson has demonstrated that adaptability and resilience are not merely compensatory traits, but powerful advantages in their own right. The human capacity to analyze, adjust, and overcome may well be the most formidable evolutionary development we have encountered. Among the audience, high-ranking officials from both the Coalition Council and Earth Command exchanged meaningful glances. Theron's reports and performance data had sparked intense debate in policy circles, culminating in a historic vote to reconsider Earth's classification and role within the Coalition. After the ceremony, Cale found himself approached by Theron and Lyra, the commanders who had once viewed him as an amusing experiment now regarded him with unmistakable respect. Your performance has changed perspectives, Adamson, Theron said, using Cale's name rather than Earth Cadet for the first time. What comes next for you? Cale smiled slightly. I'll be returning to Earth to help develop a new training program, one that integrates ICA methodologies with Earth approaches. We're also preparing for the first major exchange program, bringing cadets from various Coalition worlds to train alongside humans and sending our people to academies throughout the Alliance. Lyra's antennae twitched with interest. And the Pioneer Adaptation Program? Will that continue? In a way, Cale replied carefully, but with a broader focus. We've learned that our greatest strength isn't just physical adaptation, but cross-species integration. Humans have a unique ability to understand and incorporate diverse perspectives. Theron nodded slowly. That was evident in the final simulation. Your team's performance metrics showed unprecedented synergy across biological barriers. A comfortable silence fell between them. The previous antagonism completely dissolved. So, Theron finally said with a hint of his old sardonic humor, I suppose 3G feels fairly easy by now? Cale smiled. Just a warm-up, Commander. There are always new limits to break. Later, as Cale boarded the transport vessel that would return him to Earth, he paused at the threshold and looked back at the Interstellar Coalition Academy. He had arrived as something of a joke, the soft-skinned curiosity from a backwater world, and was departing as a legend who had rewritten perceptions of human potential. Inside the ship, he made his way to his private compartment and deactivated the artificial gravity compensator, feeling Earth's familiar 1G pull settle over him like a comfortable embrace. The relative lightness felt almost like floating after months of enhanced gravity training. Cale knew that the Real Challenge was just beginning. Earth's path to greater recognition within the Coalition would require more than one exemplary cadet. It would demand systematic proof that humans could contribute uniquely valuable perspectives and capabilities to interstellar security and governance. As the transport broke orbit and set course for Earth, Kale reviewed the classified briefing materials for his next assignment. The Pioneer Adaptation Program was indeed continuing, but with his input, it was evolving into something more ambitious, the Interspecies Integration Initiative. Humans wouldn't just adapt to survive in alien environments. They would help forge new approaches that combine the strengths of multiple species into unified strategies. The galaxy was vast, complex, and dangerous. No single evolutionary path had all the answers. But perhaps the species that had evolved to be adaptable rather than specialized was uniquely positioned to help bridge the biological divides between worlds. Kale closed the briefing file and allowed himself a moment of reflection. The commander's joke with the gravity had unwittingly revealed humanity's greatest strength. Not the ability to endure hardship, but the choice to embrace challenge as opportunity. In a universe of beings evolved for specific advantages, humans had evolved to adapt to anything, and that made all the difference.